The history of the United States is a rich tapestry woven from diverse threads of cultural, political, and social developments. It spans centuries, beginning with the indigenous peoples who first inhabited the land, continuing through the arrival of European settlers, and evolving into the complex and multifaceted nation it is today. This essay explores key moments in American history, from its earliest days to the modern era, highlighting the events and figures that have shaped the country. Long before the arrival of Europeans, the Americas were home to millions of indigenous peoples belonging to diverse cultures and civilizations. These included the sophisticated societies of the Aztec, Maya, and Inca in Central and South America, as well as numerous tribes across North America, such as the Iroquois, Cherokee, and Sioux. These groups developed intricate systems of governance, trade, and spirituality, which were disrupted by the arrival of European explorers. The late 15th century marked the beginning of European exploration and colonization. Christopher Columbus's voyages in 1492, sponsored by Spain, opened the door to widespread European contact with the Americas. Spanish, French, Dutch, and English explorers soon followed, establishing colonies and trading posts. In 1607, the English founded Jamestown, Virginia, the first permanent English settlement in North America, marking the beginning of what would become the United States. The 18th century saw significant growth in the British colonies. However, tensions began to rise between the colonists and the British government due to issues such as taxation without representation, trade restrictions, and military occupation. Events like the Boston Tea Party in 1773 and the publication of Thomas Paine's Common Sense in 1776 galvanized public sentiment against British rule. The American Revolution, 1775 to 1783, was a pivotal conflict in which the 13 colonies fought for and gained independence from Britain. The Declaration of Independence, authored by Thomas Jefferson and adopted on July 4, 1776, articulated the colony's grievances and aspirations for self-governance. Under the leadership of figures like George Washington, the colonies emerged victorious, culminating in the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Following independence, the United States faced the challenge of creating a stable government. The Articles of Confederation, adopted during the war, proved inadequate, leading to the Constitutional Convention in 1787. The resulting U.S. Constitution established a federal system of government with checks and balances, becoming the supreme law of the land. The Bill of Rights, ratified in 1791, guaranteed fundamental freedoms such as speech, religion, and due process. The early years of the Republic were marked by expansion and conflict. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803 doubled the nation's size, and the Lewis and Clark expedition explored these vast new territories. However, tensions with Britain led to the War of 1812, which tested the young nation's resolve and solidified its independence. The 19th century was defined by both progress and profound divisions. The expansion of U.S. territory through westward migration and acquisitions, such as Texas and California, heightened tensions over the issue of slavery. The Missouri Compromise, 1820, and the Compromise of 1850 attempted to address these disputes, but sectionalism continued to grow. In 1861, the election of Abraham Lincoln, a vocal opponent of slavery's expansion, prompted Southern states to secede, forming the Confederate States of America. The Civil War, 1861 to 1865, was the bloodiest conflict in U.S. history, pitting North against South. The Union's victory, marked by key events such as the Emancipation Proclamation and the Gettysburg Address, led to the abolition of slavery through the 13th Amendment. Reconstruction, 1865 to 1877, aimed to rebuild the South and integrate formerly enslaved people into American society. Despite the passage of the 14th and 15th Amendments, which granted citizenship and voting rights, systemic racism and economic inequality persisted, laying the groundwork for future civil rights struggles. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw rapid industrialization, urbanization, and immigration. Innovations such as the telephone, electricity, and the assembly line transformed American life. Industrial magnates like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller amassed great wealth, while labor unions fought for workers' rights. The Progressive Era, 1890s to 1920s, responded to these changes with reforms aimed at addressing social and economic inequalities. Figures like Theodore Roosevelt and Jane Addams championed causes such as antitrust legislation, women's suffrage, and improved labor conditions. The 19th Amendment, ratified in 1920, granted women the right to vote, marking a significant milestone in the fight for equality. The United States emerged as a global power during the 20th century. World War I, 1914 to 1918, saw the country play a decisive role in the Allied victory. However, the interwar period was marked by the Great Depression, a severe economic downturn that began in 1929. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal program sought to alleviate the crisis through public works, financial reforms, and social safety nets. World War II, 1939 to 1945, solidified America's position as a superpower. The attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 brought the U.S. into the conflict, leading to significant contributions on both the European and Pacific fronts. The war's end ushered in an era of economic prosperity and global leadership, but also the tensions of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. The mid-20th century was marked by the civil rights movement, which sought to end racial segregation and discrimination. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X played pivotal roles in advancing equality through protests, legal challenges, and grassroots organizing. Landmark legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 represented significant progress, though challenges remain. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the United States faced new challenges and opportunities. The rise of technology transformed industries and daily life, while globalization reshaped the economy. Events such as the September 11, 2001, terrorist attacks and subsequent wars in Afghanistan and Iraq highlighted issues of national security and foreign policy. Meanwhile, debates over healthcare, climate change, and social justice continue to shape the national discourse. American history is a dynamic and ongoing story of triumphs and trials. From its indigenous roots and revolutionary beginnings to its role as a global leader, the United States has been shaped by the interplay of diverse peoples, ideas, and events. Understanding this history is essential to addressing the challenges of the present and building a more inclusive and equitable future. In short, the history of the lands that became the United States began with the arrival of the first people in the Americas around 15,000 BC. After European colonization of North America began in the late 15th century, wars and epidemics decimated indigenous societies. By the 1760s, the 13 British colonies were established. The southern colonies built an agricultural system on slave labor, enslaving millions from Africa. After defeating France, the British Parliament imposed a series of taxes. Resistance to these taxes, especially the Boston Tea Party in 1773, led to Parliament issuing the Intolerable Acts designed to end self-government. In 1776, the United States declared its independence. Led by General George Washington, it won the Revolutionary War in 1783. The Constitution was adopted in 1789, and a Bill of Rights was added in 1791 to guarantee inalienable rights. Washington, the first president, and his advisor Alexander Hamilton created a strong central government. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubled the size of the country. Encouraged by available, inexpensive land and the notion of manifest destiny, the country expanded to the Pacific coast. The resulting expansion of slavery was increasingly controversial. After the election of Abraham Lincoln as president in 1860, the Southern states seceded to form the pro-slavery Confederate States of America, and started the Civil War. The Confederates' defeat in 1865 led to the abolition of slavery. In the subsequent Reconstruction era, the national government gained explicit duty to protect individual rights. White Southern Democrats regained their political power in the South in 1877, often using paramilitary suppression of voting and Jim Crow laws to maintain white supremacy. The United States became the world's leading industrial power in the 20th century, largely due to entrepreneurship, industrialization, and the arrival of millions of immigrant workers. A national railroad network was completed, and large-scale mines and factories were established. Dissatisfaction with corruption, inefficiency, and traditional politics stimulated the progressive movement, leading to reforms including the federal income tax, direct election of senators, citizenship for many indigenous people, alcohol prohibition, and women's suffrage. Initially neutral during World War I, the United States declared war on Germany in 1917, joining the successful Allies. After the prosperous Roaring Twenties, the Wall Street crash of 1929 marked the onset of the decade-long worldwide Great Depression. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal programs, including unemployment relief and Social Security, defined modern American liberalism. Following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States entered World War II, helping defeat Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy in the European theater. In the Pacific War, America defeated Imperial Japan after using nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as rival superpowers during the Cold War. The two countries confronted each other indirectly in the arms race, the space race, propaganda campaigns, and proxy wars. In the 1960s, in large part due to the civil rights movement, social reforms enforced the constitutional rights of voting and freedom of movement to African Americans. In the 1980s, Ronald Reagan's presidency realigned American politics towards reductions in taxes and regulations. The Cold War ended when the Soviet Union was dissolved in 1991, leaving the United States as the world's sole superpower. Foreign policy after the Cold War has often focused on conflicts in the Middle East, especially after the September 11 attacks. In the 21st century, the country was negatively affected by the Great Recession and the COVID-19 pandemic. In the 2020s, America withdrew from the war in Afghanistan, intervened in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and got involved in the Middle Eastern crisis. It is not definitively known how or when Native Americans first settled the Americas. The prevailing theory proposes that people from Eurasia followed game across Beringia, a land bridge that connected Siberia to present-day Alaska during the Ice Age, and then spread southward, perhaps as early as 30,000 years ago. These early inhabitants, called Paleo-Indians, soon diversified into hundreds of culturally distinct groups. By 10,000 BCE, humans were well established throughout North America. Originally, Paleo-Indians hunted Ice Age megafauna like mammoths, but as they began to go extinct, people turned instead to bison as a food source, and later foraging for berries and seeds. Paleo-Indians in central Mexico were the first in the Americas to farm, around 8000 BCE. Eventually, the knowledge began to spread northward. By 3000 BCE, corn was being grown in the valleys of Arizona and New Mexico, followed by primitive irrigation systems and, by 300 BCE, early villages of the Hohokam 3-4. One of the earlier cultures in the present-day United States was the Clovis culture, 9100 to 8850 BCE, who are primarily identified by the use of fluted spear points called the Clovis point. The Folsom culture was similar, but is marked by the use of the Folsom point. A later migration around 8000 BCE included Nadine-speaking peoples, who reached the Pacific Northwest by 5000 BCE. From there, they migrated along the Pacific coast and into the interior. Another group, the Oshera tradition people, who lived from 5500 BCE to 600 CE, were part of the archaic Southwest. The Adena began constructing large earthwork mounds around 600 BCE. They are the earliest known people to have been mound builders, although there are mounds in the United States that predate this culture. The Adnans were absorbed into the Hopewell tradition, a powerful people who traded tools and goods across a wide territory. They continued the Adena